And I'm very much an academic and a modernist literary scholar. I work especially on T.S. Eliot and Virginia Woolf, but I've published also on the Harlem Renaissance writer Nella Larson and Joseph Conrad and various other people. And I've published a couple of academic books, but I've always also written creative work. And I wrote a novel during my PhD, which is still not published, but I still love it and I've tried. So this is part of the message, is keep trying. If you're a creative writer, you have to just write and love it and dedicate the time, but also be ready for so many rejections you cannot even believe it could be possible. The poetry, in some ways that's easier to do in between. So, you know, writing a long novel, 200 or so pages, is a little harder to do when you don't have any time, but you can write a poem. And so I started to, well, no, I'd always been writing poems, but I started to write them a little more seriously, I guess. Maybe, I don't know when, undergrad, during my PhD, and then I realized that this was actually maybe a viable, okay thing to do as a literary professor, that you could do the creative work as well. And Queen's actually has been very supportive about that, and I have to, you know, just say thank you to the department for encouraging that aspect of just our other selves, let's say. It's not always like that in different departments. So what else? I wanted to just maybe talk a bit about process for how to publish, if people are interested in this. So I think, how many people, just out of curiosity, and I don't know why this is going in and out, I'm really, it's
great.
okay?
Yeah,
all right,
it's
echoing back here, but how many people write some a creative sense as well as, okay, quite a few. Like I'm seeing probably 2/3 at least people here. Some of you may already be published. If you're not, I think my main recommendation is to research venues, look for journals that you like and you like what they publish, and just start submitting your work and just keep trying. And after, I don't know what the statistics are, 20 rejections, you might get one poem published, something like that. And then as you go along, you're building up a repertoire. So you're building up a body of work slowly, and some of it may be published, some of it may not be. But in my case, I actually have to thank Scott Straker a lot, because we had one conversation at a pub 4 years ago or so, and I had a lot of poetry I had written at this point, and I had published quite a bit. And I'm wringing my hands and I'm saying, yeah, I don't know if I'll ever have a book. And Scott was like, you have enough for a book. Come on, don't get like this. You've got to just submit it, get it together. So I did. And the end result, you know, I'm really happy with what the press has done, McGill Queen's Press. In terms of covers, this cover I did not choose, and I initially hated it. I've come to like it. They did their own in-house art design, and I have to thank the editors there. This is another thing. Don't be too attached to your own words, because other people will not think they're very good at certain points. So as the famous expression goes, kill your darlings, you know, be ready to let go some of the lines you think are the absolute best lines you've ever written. Those might be the ones that are just ouchy for other people. And let's see, what else? Workshops. If you have a chance to apply to go even for a weekend or a week somewhere just to write and concentrate on writing, there are some grants for these things. Some of them are very simple, like you go camping, you sleep in a tent and you bring your own food, but you hang out with other writers. This is a fantastic way to both write, but also to network and meet other writers. So a lot of this book came out of a stay I had at Banff, at the Banff Center for the Arts in 2010, when I was working on my novel there. And I was working with one of well, actually Margaret Atwood's main editor for like 25 years on this novel, but I was also writing a bit of poetry. And I had the good fortune of having Don Mackay be at Banff right at that moment, and we would go on hikes and just talk about poetry. And he ended up being a strong endorser for the book. These kinds of things just happen if you're in these workshop situations and you're just putting yourself out there. You know, doing the genuine work and really doing what you love and working very, very hard on. Sometimes you're working on a paragraph or a verse paragraph for days, and it seems absurd, but you know, eventually it will be finished and you'll have something that comes out, and then it's kind of decided that this is done. So the question of where do you stop, I think, is always a question, especially in art, but also in academic writing. Okay, let me just tell you a tiny bit about the content of the book, and then I thought I would read about 3 poems. So it's very much a book, I would say it's eco-critically, eco-poetically oriented. A lot of personal emotions, pains, sufferings, going into a dialogue with what is landscape, what is the natural, what is this world around us that is so beautiful and so wondrous and yet so precarious at the same time. I would say that animates a lot of the motive of the book and a lot of the passion behind it. I was a tree planter during my undergrad for 2 intense summers, so worked very, very hard in the bush. Some of the poems come out of that, some of them come out of being in Kingston on the lake, in the limestone city. I've spent a fair bit of time out in the natural, I'm putting that in quotation marks all the time, but enough that I've ended up meditating on it a fair bit and trying to come to terms with climate change, climate catastrophe. Where are we as a world in this moment of 2022, 2021? COVID doesn't exactly come into it because the book was already being edited by late 2020, but there are some resonances. So I thought I would read 3 poems. Before I start, I actually would like to dedicate this reading to the memory of Steve Heighton, who was an incredible Kingston poet who had strong connections to the English department, who passed away very unexpectedly this April. And he read some of these poems in early form, and I'm very, very grateful for that. Okay, Memory Child. The mollusk shell had left its mark on a flat limestone shard my daughter carried to me in her small hand. Look, Mama, a fossil. This used to be a snail. Together we finger comb a caress across tiny ridges, echo and undulation, where a shell was pressed to death before we humans walked or screeched out art. The stone one kicks with one's boot will outlast Shakespeare. Do you want to keep it? I ask. No. And she throws it to splash and sink beneath a small blue wave. Her voice, soprano's child. Goodbye, snail. Her feet leave dark traces, cup and squelch wet sand. Her eyes contain the outside and us. What does she remember? At 6, her mind is already past first things, born thickly with ardor and ache for people her heart had loved who left without goodbyes. Her own heart's desires, creatures of magic, contours of sensation, the beginnings of wisdom, what's forbidden or impossible. I've tried to cradle her to dreaming. Who can say forever to her now, and who can prime her plastic mind to shapes that twine with hope? I remember the feeling of conception, like the rush and tug of sudden flight, the light of her already lit small fire, and the butterfly kicking, her toes tickling my insides like laughing rain. Her first knowing look, as if, yes, she's been here before. I've come back for my 7th life, she tells me. It's a matter of fact, nothing unusual, but this is her favorite life so far, and inside sadness is glory. If you see it right way round, find the seam, reverse it to perspective eyes, unwind light, joy's unraveling spool, marking tissue with animal memory, and that same shell on the silted bottom of a lake's swell. Primeval basin dug by a meteor in its lightning rushed earth. Given some time, it's as if she knows the stone will shatter and dissolve too, to dust return. Given time, the gift of the unrelenting hand, we will all meet in ether and desire. Endless germination, this beginning again, always the sense of the new, the rawness of the patterning, as if never again and never before, and always a freshness of the universe's breathing. Thank you. I'll read 2 more, they're shorter. Here's one, it's called Sylvan Signals and the Moon. This is a bit of an homage to Emily Dickinson. I was trying to imagine how Emily Dickinson would write about the climate crisis in her, quote, spasmodic gait, as she herself described it. A world was born to us, and carefree stars agreed. Someone claimed the gift. We dreamed we'd crown the moon and space and fashion them our own. How large the globe, the earth, our eyes, every heart could fill and fill, till moonbeams blanched her sister, corals paled, and sylvan pyres sang, signaling to heaven, flames aflood, our wild dolphins gone. What mire in our hearts could scull its way through tears, our animals unfreed, forced, tethered to our greed. Sail farther, planets. Earth's form has wrecked her shell. Our bidding's toll has taken, her majesty's purloined. And one last short-ish one. This is called Small Hands. The breath of stars might perceive with nebula and shine what hands understand with mind. The touch of patterning without pattern, roiling to feel. Small hands digging earth, cradling cool, fertile loaming, touch hungry to finger yesterday's flash of storm, that grounded energy and frenzy, the new bright growth, green breaking and wending after the exclamation of atmosphere. Amaryllis, star, flowers, the fian, the sky itself chasing us to summer. We will never stop the greening because the universe is not entropic, but expanding always to small hands reaching. Thank you very much.